we're going to talk about meditation. First off, one of the most important things in learning any kind of meditation or mindfulness of any kind is having some faith that the person teaching you knows what they're talking about. So traditionally, this is where I would be telling you all about my lineage and who I trained with and how long I did that, so that you could have confidence in what I'm saying. Now, in today's world, that's generally your Harvard certificate or your whatever mindfulness training thing. Mine is almost 40 years of martial arts practice, and I became a formal disciple under the abbot of a Buddhist temple about 20 years ago. And he was my main meditation teacher, my root guru, as it's told. So what I'm teaching, and what people have asked me to teach now, is not just the fundamentals of meditation, but sort of where to go and what the stages kind of are. Because when somebody says mindfulness, everybody tunes out. And for good reason, because most people don't really have much to say about it. So let's go through the basics, the foundations of how to get to a quote-unquote mindfulness meditation, okay? So what we're trying to do is simply bring the mind into a single point at a single time. So because the mind is all over the place, this kind of meditation is bringing it into two places, basically, instead of 10,000. So you get a word with 2 syllables, and you get a space in your body, generally somewhere on your center line. And then you repeat this word in your mind over and over and over to the space that you've put on your center line, so like your belly button. Doesn't really matter why. Why are you doing this? Because it's better than your mind going everywhere all at once, right? It's better than the monkey mind taking control of everything. What'll happen is if we practice this, your mind will start to slowly calm down. And as it calms down, you'll notice longer and longer stretches where it's just you and your word and that space in the body. Okay? This is called approaching one-pointedness. And one-pointedness is that moment when, it's the moment before you realize that you're in the moment, if you will, right? Because as soon as you realize, hey, this is the spot, I'm actually not thinking anything, but you're thinking, so you're out of it. It's such a fun time. So meditation is returning to meditation. Mindfulness is returning to the absolute present moment without any judgment upon it. That's what real mindfulness is. So if you can get to the real present moment, meaning you don't have any emotional attachments, you have no judgments you've already got going on, and you can look at it objectively, your life gets way easier to live. Simple as that. But that's about as far as anybody ever teaches in meditation, which is baloney. So let's not stop there.
So what happens if you're...
Okay. It did not follow.
You lose where you're at and you need to come back to that spot of mindfulness or centeredness during the meditation. What are the steps to bring yourself back if you find your mind is just flitting to the grocery list or got to pick up the kids?
So that's the secret to having... That makes sense. That's the secret to having a focal point and a silent recitation. So that there's really actually 4 stages to what's called single pointedness. So you start off with the cluttered mind, right? And the monkey mind. And you give yourself this 2-syllable mantra that has some kind of good meaning because you're basically driving it into your subconscious. And because it has a 2-syllable cadence to it, you can kind of hear it in your own head if you keep repeating it, right? It's got a beat to it. It's trance-inducing.
Like what would be a good example?
My teachers, and the same one I use, is a Pali word, which is buto. Buto, which means, it's the word purify. So my entire experience with that word is this abbot of a Buddhist temple said, this is a good word, I use it. That sounds about right to me, right? But it has no other connotation. Like, you wouldn't want to use the word money. You would probably go crazy because it would be driven into your subconscious as a part of who you are, like reprogramming yourself.
Would music help?
No. The problem with music is it's not a single thing going over and over.
Well, is it like rhyming? In that sense, that's what I mean by music.
The problem is that it's too long.
Oh, okay.
It takes the mind on a journey.
So it has to be short.
You want it to be here in this moment right now, right?
10 second.
Not even. So like when you're doing Butto, it's that fast, right? Butto. That moment, if at the end of the syllable, if you will, my mind can just be in this spot. But then it's very easy for my mind to go somewhere else. So even 2 syllables is a long time. Now in Mantrayana or Vajrayana Buddhism, stuff been studying this last couple of years, that's where you get into all the mantra repetitions, like Om Mani Padme Hum. So you get all of these syllables in a row. But it's very easy when it's this sort of rhyming scheme of 6 or 12 syllables to just sing the song, right? And that puts you into a place where you can be absolutely tranced out or absolutely present. And that's where the danger in those practices are, right? You want to be exactly where you are when you're repeating your word and repeating and focusing on your focal point. And then what happens is the next stage is that you'll start to notice that you don't need to repeat your word to your focal point. It's sort of just happening by itself. You sit in meditation and you get started and it just becomes super easy, almost like it's an automatic process. Then the idea is you want to remove the word. Just get the word to get quieter and quieter and quieter until there's only a focal point. Right? So this place that you've been concentrating on in your body, right?
So instead of reciting it just out
place.
loud, you would then get to a place where you would recite it in your mind instead of out loud. And then it would just get quieter and quieter in the background.
Mm-hmm. Eventually, yeah. And then what you're left with is this feeling of like if you were to take your pinky finger or the end of your index finger and just put it on a hot stove and really burn it right to the bone. Your mind would only be in one place, right? Only one place. You wouldn't even be worried about your bills, right? You'd be cool about the bills because my finger's on fire. So if you can get to that kind of one pointed place, but you can do it
without fear or pain.
Without any kind of extremes, right? You're doing it with a trained mind. So if you get to the place where you can sit and there's this sort of feeling of the focal point and it's just still, that's called one pointedness. And that is becoming mindful of the present moment. Because you're not busy in your head thinking about other things. You're just here, right? If we're sitting here in the car, I could be, other than talking obviously, but I could be mindful of what the temperature is. I could be mindful of not just the conversation, but what the sun feels like on my shoulder and everything else. Because there's actually a lot happening in the present moment, a lot more than we realize. But we're busy shading it with our bullshit, thinking about other things.
Yeah.
So if you can get your mind trained well enough to get to a single pointed state, then it's about increasing the time. My teacher, Longpor, he called it the AMP, the Authoritative Mind Power Point, the AMPP, I guess. Authoritative Mind Power. So if you get to the Authoritative Mind Power Point, it means that your mind has actually trained itself like a muscle to a certain extent that now you actually have enough strength you could stand up and exercise. Because our minds start out just like weak. Like not sort of like, grandma weak, but like can't move corpse-like weak. Really weak. Especially because, like, look at attention spans now and such, right? I mean, I'm bored already. So it's really difficult. But if you can get your mind to that single pointed space, then what he said was you try to stretch it. He said 5 minutes. If you can sit in that space for 5 minutes, you are very strong. That's exactly what he told me.
So the goal to shoot for to begin with as a beginner would be anything from like 15 seconds would be like a good mid-range. Like I'm starting to get where I can keep my thoughts in one space for that length of time. But the whole point is to eventually get to a point where you're not watching the clock. Would that not be an indicator of that suddenly, instead of you're like, oh, this minute is dragging by, it's taking forever, as opposed to suddenly you're like, oh, I've been sitting here for 4 minutes already. Wow.
Mm-hmm. When we were training at the temple with him, it was, 30, and I mean first session, 30 minutes walking meditation, 30 minutes sitting meditation. That was not easy. I had meditated before and it was not easy. I can't even imagine the hell other people were going through, right? because it starts to be like in 30 minutes you'll get 5 seconds of single pointedness. That's pretty hard. But as soon as you have the experience of single pointedness, you have the tendency to chase it, right?
Yeah.
So then you try to create more single pointed things, blah, 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 blah. Eventually you realize you're chasing your tail and you relax, because it's actually about letting things go, right? It's not about focus. It's about just stop thinking about all that other crap. And suddenly what's left is calm, still, relaxing, chill.
It's
That's what you
more
want.
about like wiping a chalkboard.
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
You know,
I've heard
take a
that
little
analogy
bit at a
before.
time and just kind of keep going until it's eventually just kind of faded dust on the board.
Mm-hmm. And things will still come and go. Things will get written on it, and you'll have to erase them too. But that's just life. Nobody's perfect. So then when you get to what he called that authoritative mind power, you can hold that one pointed state. That's where there's different paths through different types of Buddhism. That's where it's no longer just being mindful. So like real mindfulness now would be being able to live in that one pointed state. Eyes open, walking around. Right? That would be pure mindfulness. So what people say, live in the now. Yes, that's the right words. But those words
But had
should
to
mean,
actually make that happen and manifest.
well, and that's it. Do you know what the temperature in the room you're in right now is like? Are you really there? Or are you busy somewhere else? Are you really cooking dinner, or are you busy thinking about the fishing season starts tomorrow? Like, really, where are you, right? That's what it's about. So if you can walk around, that's why we did walking meditation. If you could walk around with your eyes open and get there, it's training you to do it in reality, right? Because if you're only sitting, not quite as effective, maybe. Yeah, so then there's the different paths that you can go from there. And that's kind of the way he explained that was like you have a bank account. So you have a bank account when you're born, it's barely got enough in it to keep you going. So he called this mind power. And every night when you go to sleep, we actually go through the stages of meditation.